Hello and welcome back. In the last video we went over the basics of how sword fighting works, and now we are ready to actually start getting better. This episode features an overview of the big 4 concepts I've created. I'll be going over these concepts briefly and provide a few helpful exercises that you can do on your own to improve, and in the next few videos we'll cover all these concepts in more detail. I consider these the 4 pillars of sword fighting. If you can master all of these, then you'll be at the top of the sword fighting food chain. The first 3 all relate to the micro. That means that you know how to do something. And the last one, the macro, means that you know what and when to do something. You'll see shortly exactly what I mean. Let's start with the easiest one, speed. Let's face it, sword fighting is a fast-paced game. You need to be quick in order to keep up with your opponents. Learning how to go fast is not something that happens overnight, but we'll go over some ways to speed up that process. I'd like to introduce the most basic speed exercise, the straight lining exercise. As the name would suggest, is to force your pieces down as fast as possible and form a straight line of pieces. This might seem pointless at first, but the reason for doing this is to train the timing and mechanics of knowing the precise timing to press spacebar as soon as the game allows you to. This is a very simple exercise for beginners for building muscle memory. As you get used to doing this, you can step up to level 2 of the exercise, where you're now allowed to rotate pieces in order to kill yourself even faster. The point of this is that we add a little bit of complexity and there's some thinking required, which is to simulate that in a real game you can't just drool all over the spacebar, but you need to put some thought into your actions. This is a great exercise because you can do it against a bot anywhere, anytime, so definitely give it a shot if you feel your speed could use some work. Okay, next up we got board control. The point of this concept is being able to match and build off of your opponent's attacks. The better you understand how the enemy's attacks affect your board and how their pattern works, the better you will be at taking countermeasures and sending attacks while getting attacked. In order to master this concept, you will need a deeper understanding of sword patterns. Go back to episode 1 if you need to refresh your basics. Knowing what your opponent's attacks will clear as is really advantageous because you will essentially have a 1 or 2 turn head start on building. See the following example. We are playing against a foil with the following pattern. Try to visualize in your head how the board will look after the strike clears and how the breakers will clear and how the board will end up afterwards. To sum it up, the basic idea is to match your opponent's board. There are many ways to do this, but the principle behind this strategy is that you use your opponent's attacks as fuel for your attacks. This is why understanding your opponent's pattern is so important. Every single piece you place affects the game a lot. Take a look at the following example. You are playing sticks and you're about to get sprinkled. Where should you place the 2 red pieces? Let's consider 2 situations. You put it on the right or on the left. Which makes your board cleaner? Yes, I do realize this might seem too simple, but this is something we'll cover later in more detail, so I want you to feel comfortable with this right now. And the last of the micro concepts is number 3, combos. Okay, so this one covers everything from breaker stacking to building during the mid-game. Since we're still at the beginner level, we're only going to cover the cookie cutter standard combo tips that you can apply in order to improve your combos. Let's start with breaker stacking. As the name implies, it's when you stack breakers on top of each other in order to create a combo effect by breaking the appropriate breaker in the middle. Let's look at the most simple breaker stack in the game, the double. As you can see, by breaking the blue, we set off the combo which allows the green breaker to fall on top of the green block. Simple enough, right? Let's look at the second breaker stack, the triple. The same principle applies. By breaking the middle breaker, you set off a cascade of breakers falling on top of each other. These breaker stacks are the most basic ones, and you should be able to make these without thinking too much, but don't worry, you can always practice against a bot where you can freely practice creating these stacks until you feel comfortable with them. Even better is if you throw in the speed exercise and try to create these stacks as fast as possible. The last breaker stacks we'll cover in this short preview are the horizontal ones. Here is the simple double, and here is the triple version. Okay, so we've learned these breaker stacks, so how are they useful? Breaker stacks allow us to make big combos when used appropriately. Let me show you an example of utilizing a triple breaker in order to create a big opener. The resulting attack consists of a 2x8 and a 2x10 sword, which will surely leave your opponent nearly dead. We'll cover other variants of combos and different stacking techniques, but for now let's continue our preview and go on to the macro. So you might be wondering, what is the macro exactly? Well, every time you decide what you're going to do, that's macro. Things like, I will build a huge opener, I will send a side sword, I will send a quick sprinkle, I will save this breaker so I can retaliate because given my opponent's board state he is about to send a huge attack. Or should I go for this risky play, or should I play it safe instead? Or should I stall and hope my opponent dies first, or am I better off trying to get the breaker before him or her? Or how big of an opener should I build? Stuff like that. Hopefully you can see how this concept is somewhat difficult to discuss generally, because everything changes depending on the exact situation you find yourself in. The point is, even if you know how to play, you might know how to send a big opener, but if you don't have the macro to back it up, it'll just be hard stock Grandmaster. And let me get this out of the way. The macro is something you'll get better at over time as you play more games. If you're going to practice this concept, I heavily recommend to record yourself playing and try to objectively think about your actions and if your decisions were correct or not. Don't just record yourself winning. Chances are you'll learn more from rewatching the games you lost. One important aspect of the macro in sword fighting is having an idea of what the opponent's board state is like. This is done partly by looking at your opponent's mini-screen, but it can go more in depth by tracking how many attacks you've both sent and received compared to the amount of breakers you've been given. A simple example is you got a few breakers, but your opponent hasn't sent anything. Chances are your opponent is about to send a big clear, so you should either prepare accordingly or try to quickly mess it up. Or hopefully you've actually put your breakers to good use and are ready to send a big clear of your own. Alright, that's it for episode 2. I hope you learned something. This was the preview of the 4 main concepts that we'll be looking into in more detail over the next few episodes. Look forward to episode 3, where we'll cover speed and board control in depth. And until then, I'd like to shout out to a few lovely people. First, thanks once again to Katrin, who made the amazing thumbnail art. A thanks to my man Tim Z for helping with the clips. Thanks to the peeps who gave their helpful input over the script. And a shout out to Jiyuu's YouTube channel. She has some nice sword fighting and weaving content, so if you're into that, you should definitely check it out. Okay, that's all from me, and I'll see you in episode 3.